When this woman entered the local metro line from work to home, she had no idea that her life would change forever. It was just a simple trip from A to B, but this particular trip would turn into a nightmare in a hurry, and it all had to do with a man on board who couldn't stop staring at her. And when she found out why, tears were streaming down her face. But before we start our story, smash the like button, make sure to subscribe and hit the notifications bell so you won't miss any new stories. It started out as just a typical day for the 38-year-old Becky. She was done with her shift at work and entered the metro station. The platform where the public transport vehicles zoomed past was a familiar sight for Becky. Becky stepped into the crowded metro, unaware of what was about to happen. The metro was packed with people like it usually was this time of the day. The tired Becky saw men and women glued to their phones, and others stared out the window. But then her eyes fell on a singular man in the back. It was a short-haired, middle-aged man. He looked ordinary, except that this man kept staring in Becky's direction. At first, Becky figured that he must have been looking at something behind her, but when she followed his gaze, there was no one there. That's when she realized that he was staring at her. Becky gave the man an uncomfortable smile in return. With that smile, Becky hoped he would realize she had noticed him so he could stop his invasive stare. But that action, unfortunately, did not give her the desired result. The strange man just kept staring at her without blinking once. It made Becky feel extremely uncomfortable. When Becky arrived at her stop, he appeared to be gone. But on her way home, Becky constantly felt that eyes were upon her. It was like someone was constantly watching, no matter how many streets she walked down. Becky continued with her day as normally as possible. She tried some light reading and ended with a movie. It got so bad that the next day, when Becky needed to return to work, she dreaded the metro trip there. And rightfully so, because the moment she entered the train, the same man was there again. Becky felt her heart beating in her chest as she saw that the same man was staring at her the entire time once again. What did he want from her? It was unnerving. Becky got on with her day fine after that. She helped people with their problems, and when doing so, Becky hoped that this day would never end. That unfortunately was not the case. The hours seemed to fly by, and before Becky knew it, her shift had ended. Becky needed to go home, which meant another metro trip. She made her way over to the metro station as quickly as possible, hoping not to encounter the same man again. But the moment Becky entered the metro, she saw him again. When the metro reached her final stop, he wasn't gone from her line of sight. No, quite the opposite. When Becky left the metro, he did so too, which added a new level of tension to her already stressful situation. This was new, and Becky did not like this development. Becky quickened her steps as she tried to leave the platform in a hurry, but to no avail because Becky saw that the man was walking behind her every time she looked over her shoulder. He kept his distance but followed her the entire time. The nervous Becky felt her leg muscles burning as she tried to make it home in record time. With each corner she passed, she hoped that the man would not be there when she turned around. She wasn't exactly clothed for a workout, but Becky didn't care. She longed for the safe environment of her home, and she wanted to leave the intrusive man in her rearview mirror. But no matter how much effort Becky put into getting some distance between herself and the scary man, he kept following her, and he kept the same 100-foot distance the entire time. Whenever Becky stopped, he would also stop and linger nearby. When she sprinted, so did he. "There is no denying it anymore. He is following me home," Becky said aloud. When she glanced back again and saw his piercing eyes fixed on her, she quickly reached into her bag for her phone. As she walked forward, fumbling to unlock her phone and call 911, something unexpected happened. Distracted, Becky didn't notice the uneven street tile. She stumbled and barely caught herself, but her phone slipped from her hands and hit the pavement. Fortunately, the device remained intact, but the fall gave the mysterious man time to close the distance. She looked around in panic only to find him gone. With her house just 600 feet away, she took a deep breath and dashed toward it. The man was out of sight, and she made it home safely, or so she thought. Inside her apartment, she locked the door and drew the curtains. As her heartbeat began to slow, she peeked through a gap in the curtains. Across the street, the man was there, motionless, staring at her window. Terror surged again. She grabbed her phone and redialed the police. This time she wouldn't hesitate. She explained everything to the operator, the strange behavior on the street, the fear that drove her to run home, and how he followed her all the way. The dispatcher assured her someone was on the way. After the call, Becky placed her phone on the table and waited anxiously. When 15 minutes had gone by, the doorbell rang. Relieved, she rushed to the door, unlocking the bolts and turning the key. But when it swung open, Becky froze. It wasn't the police, it was him. The same man who had followed her now stood right at her doorstep. As she started to push the door shut, he stepped forward and wedged his foot in the doorway. Then he spoke. "Please listen to me. I desperately need your help." Becky's fear turned to confusion. His soft tone didn't match the menacing presence she had sensed earlier. She managed to ask, voice trembling, "Why did you follow me?" Tears welled in his eyes. "I can't explain in words why I'm here, but it's urgent. Please, Becky, you have to trust me." Seeing his tears, the harsh image she had formed of him began to fade. The man's words took Becky by surprise, not just because he was pleading for help, but because he somehow knew her name. That single detail made her skin crawl. Grabbing her coat, Becky followed him out into the night. As they walked, the man introduced himself as David and claimed they had met before. Becky, confused, listened quietly as he explained it happened at the hospital where she worked. David said he came in for an appointment weeks ago and remembered her kindness. While others treated him indifferently, Becky had been patient and warm. That memory stayed with him. When he saw her again on the metro, he felt compelled to reach out. At first, Becky struggled to recall the encounter. She saw countless patients every week. But as he spoke, the memory surfaced. She remembered. It wasn't David who was being treated. He had been there with someone else. David confirmed this, emotion rising again in his voice. He admitted he wasn't the one in need now either. They stopped in front of a small weathered house. "We're here," he said, opening the door. Becky hesitated. Was she really about to enter a stranger's home? Before she could decide, a weak voice called from inside. "David, is that you, my boy?" The voice made David break down in tears. Becky, moved by the moment, stepped inside. The home was modest and sparsely furnished. In the living room, she saw an elderly man lying in a hospital bed, pale and trembling. Despite her nursing experience, the sight struck her deeply. He looked far older than his years. "Who is this lovely girl, David?" the man asked. David rushed to help his father sit up, gently introducing Becky as someone from the hospital who had shown them kindness. Becky greeted the man politely, though she was unsure how she could help. David then explained everything. His father suffered from a rare illness affecting his mobility and organs. Over the past year, the condition had worsened. They had visited numerous hospitals, but each time, after the initial consultation, they were turned away. The treatment his father needed was expensive and experimental. No insurance plan they had could cover it. Each hospital gave them hope only to retract it after checking the costs. They had been rejected time and time again. Becky listened in silence, taking in the weight of their struggle. David explained that amidst all the rejection, her empathy during their brief encounter had been the only warmth they'd felt. It had given him hope, enough to seek her out when he saw her again. Hospitals kept their doors open but closed them to those in real need. And Becky, just a nurse with limited influence, felt helpless now. She looked at the frail man and wished she could do more. David's eyes met hers once more, silently asking for guidance, for anything she could offer. Though she didn't have a solution yet, she understood the gravity of why he followed her. He wasn't a threat. He was a desperate son, clinging to the last person who had shown his father compassion. Everything had happened so fast. Just days ago, Becky feared for her safety, and now she was standing in a stranger's home, asked to help save his dying father. The emotional weight overwhelmed her. She broke into tears, admitting the healthcare system had failed this man. "We can't leave him like this, but I don't know how to help." Still, Becky promised to try. That same evening, she called her close friend and seasoned hospital nurse, Monica. Despite Monica's sympathy, she had no solution. Other colleagues gave the same answer. The system was too rigid, the treatment too costly. The rejection stung, but Becky wasn't ready to walk away. She began visiting the old man daily, providing pain relief and comfort. It was the only help she could offer. But over the following weeks, it became painfully clear. His condition was worsening, and her efforts were no longer enough. On a rainy Thursday, she arrived with a heavy heart, prepared to say goodbye and explain she couldn't continue. But when David opened the door, he greeted her with a smile, not sorrow. Confused, Becky asked what had happened, but David remained quiet, offering her cake instead. She couldn't understand the celebration until he embraced her and thanked her deeply. Then he explained, his father had been accepted for the special treatment previously denied. Becky was stunned. They hadn't qualified, and they couldn't afford it. What changed? David showed her an email on his computer. After Becky had called her colleagues, their story began to circulate. It spread through hospital staff, eventually reaching a local newspaper. A detailed article shared the family's heartbreaking journey and ended with a call for help. Miraculously, a wealthy donor had read the article and offered to cover the full treatment, no strings attached. Overwhelmed, Becky could barely speak. "Miracles do happen," she finally whispered. Soon after, treatment began. The operation was successful, and the new medication showed promise. That very day, he returned home to recover, with Becky continuing to provide care. Over the next few weeks, his health improved rapidly. Within a month, she only needed to stop by once a week. By the end of the 6-month trial, he no longer required regular help. Becky had gone from being a stranger to a crucial part of their lives. Even after her medical care was no longer needed, Becky continued to visit, this time not in uniform, but as a friend. She'd come by for coffee, laughter, and updates. Her bond with David and his father had become something rare and beautiful. For David and his father, Becky had become more than a nurse. She was the reason hope returned to their lives. The woman who once feared a stranger and, in the end, changed everything by choosing to listen.